It says
Oh, there it
live
is.
on my side.
Now we're live. So a little delayed. Good evening. Welcome to Going for Two. This is the slightly delayed only YouTube podcast in human recorded history to feature a male and female host drinking our way through the important topics of the day, as long as they touch the football world, and not in that way. I am Zach Law. This is Sharona Stormborn. This week, Sharona brings the guest, and I bring the beer. Cherry beer, by the way. We'll get into that later,
Oh,
though.
Lord.
I'll say hi to Don, even though he's probably asleep because he's a teacher and they fall asleep at 8 o'clock on a weeknight. So if you want consistency, well, you talk to Bob. Bob Lung is the author of the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, which I won for being consistently awesome. I mean, fast in drafting the Scott Fish Bowl. But let's head to BigGuyFantasySports.com to see all of Bob's handiwork. How you doing, Bob? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Really excited. I'm glad you won the book. I think I remember that now that you mentioned it, that you were one of the fast drafters and you got the book. And I know Sharona's been reading it, and she
I
says she's
have
been using
been.
it,
I
and
have
I'm
been
excited for
using
that.
it. Yes, and we're going to talk about that because I definitely have been.
Good, good. And yeah, so I'm excited to be here, be a part of the show, and thank you for having me.
No,
Let's do it very
thanks for
quick.
joining.
Now, Bob has the correct shirt for the show tonight. Well, it looks like he's actually drinking water because he's a pro and he's actually drafting
Well,
later,
actually, I'm
right?
drinking water because I have a head cold, and beer would probably just make it that much worse. So, but I'm happy to be here from the standpoint of, so my buddies have been brewing beer for years, and we call it Big Guy Brewery, and so it goes along with the Big Guy Fantasy Sports. So
Mm.
just a shout out to them as well. And if I had a beer with their logo on it, I'd have it here, but they take it all home with me with
You know,
them.
it's kind of a golden age of craft beer and brewing your own beer.
Hmm.
Good
Yeah.
time to be a beer drinker.
It's not bad. But I got the Oma Gang Rosetta. Sharona likes it because it's cherry because she loves fruit beer.
I
It's like
love
her
it.
favorite. I'm gonna make her drink one on opening weekend, but she won't even know at that point. And then of course the Kirsch Goza, cherry Goza sour beer, quite delicious. I have a good amount in my collection. But Bob, how did you decide to hit this niche of consistency, which I think is a good one since people are playing a lot of weekly DFS type games now.
Well, I mean, the whole consistency thing really started for me. I mean, I've been playing fantasy football since 1985. About 2002, actually prior to 2002, there was a number of years where my teams were one of the top three in scoring, but I wasn't making the playoffs. And I just couldn't understand why. And being a bean counter in my real job, I decided to crunch some numbers and figure out what the issue was. And then really it came to fruition in 2002 when I was in my touchdown only league, and the league that I was in, and I had Sean Alexander on my team, and he won the MVP. He rushed for 15 touchdowns, and my team was 7-7 during the regular season. I didn't make the playoffs, and I realized it was because uh, Sean Alexander had 5 touchdowns in one week on a Monday night, 3 touchdowns in another week, and 2 in another. So almost 2/3 of his touchdowns were in 3 games out of the 14, and the other games just he wasn't helping me out. And I figured out if he would have scored just 1 touchdown every week, I'd have made the playoffs and would have won the championship. And so that's where the consistency part came into play. And then over time, I've gotten some friends to help me with the database side of it. And now you can go to Big Guy Fantasy Sports, put in your own scoring method, and figure out who the most consistent players are in your league. So there you go.
Well, how did you come up with kind of your version of the quality start, the clutch game
Clutch
ranking?
games. So basically, what it's based on is how many teams are in your league, and then it calculates kind of setting who the top 12 quarterbacks would be for your league that week, top 24 running backs, 36 receivers, and 12 tight ends. Now, the clutch factor that it calculates isn't exact. So some weeks you might have 17 quarterbacks exceed that clutch factor. Some weeks there might only be 10. But in the average, it's supposed to pretty much identify the top 12, 24, 36, and 12 for each week. And then at the end of the year, obviously, you see who the most consistent players are, or clutch players.
Well, who are some of the guys that kind of surprise you when you look at their clutch versus their overall rating from maybe just last year?
I mean, one of the guys that really stick out to me and really hasn't been being drafted very much at all is Justin Forsett from the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, just 2 years ago, he was one of the most consistent running backs in the NFL. He was in the top 10 in consistency as well as top 10 in points. Last year had kind of a down year. He hurt his arm, missed the last 5 or 6 games of the year. Right now, his ADP is somewhere in the sixth, seventh, eighth round, and he's the starter and they're going to give him the ball. And plus, they have Mark Trestman there. And so in a PPR league, I think Forsett's golden, and I've gotten him in a lot of leagues so far this year.
I took it too. I'm
Middle,
looking to see which one. Yeah.
yeah, so I was just in the Fantasy League of Experts draft in New York City this past weekend, and I got him as my RB3 somewhere in the eighth or ninth round after getting Jamal Charles and Le'Veon Bell in rounds 1 and 2. So I felt I can at least flex him starting when Bell's out for the first 4 weeks, and then when Bell comes back, I'll just put him in a flex spot for the rest of the year. But yeah, he's definitely one of those guys that just not getting any love. His consistency has proven himself worthy in the past, so he's been a great value for me in my draft so far this year.
Yeah, Bob was nice enough to come on my podcast, and I got a copy of his book, and I read it, and I was like, this is great stuff, and this is before I ever did a draft or anything, and so, after I read it, I sat down, and I was like, let me think about this, and thinking back over the years, it really, how I've most consistently lost games besides just not paying attention and not setting my roster,
Well,
the right way. Yeah, that will do it. But is guys not being consistent and who hasn't had that guy who's giving you 2 points or whatever, and you've lost your game because of that. And so when I went to draft this year, that's kind of been, my thing. And, I probably took him a little bit high, but, I when I was going to draft Devontae Freeman, I was like, well, his numbers are probably going to drop, but it was probably going to be hard to maintain the level that he was
right.
anyway. But I still think that he's going to be consistent. They're going to give the ball to other guys, but I think you're going to still see, that consistent level across the board, throughout the season. And, thinking that way, sort of made me feel a little bit better about it. But, for me, I was like, and I think you and I talked about this, Bob. I was like, well, because I really struggled, Le'Veon Bell was still there.
Mm-hmm.
When I did Devonta Freeman, and I was like, well, here's where that consistency thing comes in. I know Bob, looks at the games that they play, but I was like, do I want to go into this with, knowing that I'm not, this is a guy that I'm not going to have possibly, the first 4 games, and what's he going to be? You think he'll be fine. Will it take a game or two? Will he jump right back in? And so, that's kind of how I went, through the process
Right.
of thinking it out, and and it really, I think I'm curious to see how my teams do this year.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think it'll help you. I think as you use it during the season, the nice thing about the website is not only can you put in your scoring method now to see who the most consistent players were last season, but during the season, I update the stats every week, so you can actually start watching trends of who consistent players are after 2 or 3, 4 weeks. Start identifying those players for your waiver wire, for possible trades, for people might not be paying attention. I mean, I got Jordan Reed last year in a
Yeah.
bunch of leagues in a trade because he was starting to show consistency, but he wasn't scoring a bunch of big points, but he was doing the 10 to 12 every week for a tight end, which is pretty clutch. And so I made some few trades, and he helped my team quite a bit in some of the teams that made the playoffs and won some championships for me.
Yeah, I took Justin Forsett in the Scotty Fish Bowl. I thought that I did,
Okay.
and I think that I took him in an MFL 10, another league that I did, and yeah, it's people seem to be shying away from him, and it is kind of curious, and I wonder, you and I talked about Bob, and as I'm going through these drafts and what have you, the rookie love is still there. You see
Oh yeah.
rookies. Rookies
Yeah.
are guys who haven't done anything yet are stacked up a lot higher than him, and
Yeah.
maybe it's just a situation where people aren't scrolling down, or I mean I don't know, but it is rather curious to me that he's not getting more love.
Yeah. Well, like I said, people look at, they a lot of people just like the word hype, and they
Mhm.
look for those hype players, and that's fine. I mean, and if that's what guys want to do, they can certainly do that. And I'll just keep my drafting my consistent clutch
Yeah.
players, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of hype and week one of preseason, the Terrence West thirst is real, y'all. So if you do like Justin Forsett, that first week of preseason was perfect for you because he probably dropped around because of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I even wonder if Terrence West was like people are going to use all their Scotty Fishbowl bonus cash on him because he's actually a player with the pulse, which is how it
Right.
goes.
Well, if you get cut and released or not, you can't make it the Cleveland Browns. Who in the world is going to think that
Yeah.
you could make it
Yeah, and the
somewhere else?
Titans cut him. I think
Yeah,
had him
Yeah.
for
yeah.
a couple
So
weeks last year, and they didn't have anything at running back.
yeah.
Not like
So yeah.
now,
So
right,
I'm
Trina?
not too worried about it.
But do you find like a correlation between like running backs who catch passes or receivers who are kind of high on receptions and their consistency? And it's kind of a high level thing, but I figure that's probably something you see.
Um, a lot of people say, well, you should look at the targets, you should look at this, you should look at that, and there is certainly some value in that, but it's not necessarily either. If players just happen to be clutch enough to, score that one touchdown a game, or get that one big play a game, or they're just somebody that just gets that nice 6 to 8 targets a game, they catch all, or most of the 6 to 8 passes, and they get 60 yards. Well, that's 14 points in a PPR league, and all you got to do is earn over 10 to be clutch in a PPR scoring format, or somewhere around 10. So, like Eric Decker last year, everybody is shocked when I tell them that he was a perfect 15 for 15 in the games he played. He only missed one game, and he led the entire NFL in consistency at wide receiver in a PPR scoring format. Second place was Brandon Marshall, who was 15 out of 16. So both of those guys are very surprising to people, and yet they still, even with Fitzgerald being signed, still not getting that great amount of love. In fact, I drafted Eric Decker in the Fantasy League of Experts this past weekend. Got Jarvis Landry, Eric Decker, and Emmanuel Sanders after getting Jamal Charles, Le'Veon Bell. So I was perfectly fine, and then came back with Delaney Walker as my tight end, who's been number 2 in consistency back-to-back years. So I'm drafting him in most of my leagues, while everybody else is drafting Gronk in the first round. So
That's true. You get a consistency out of a Titan. Hey, who thought? But
who would have known?
when there wasn't anybody else, and we're not quite sure if there's anybody else this year, but
Maybe DeMarco Murray. We'll see.
we will see. But in your rankings, you kind of had Marcus Mariota as overrated, so I'll give the side eye to Sharona, who just drafted him in our NFL 10 league
Well,
together.
he also had good. I mean, he had
He's
good
also one of the
consistent.
few rookies that have ever been
Yeah.
over 60% in his rookie season. In fact, only
Yeah.
one of 3 in their rookie season will be over 60%. The other 2 were RG3, nice, and Cam Newton, his rookie season. So he actually did pretty well last year. I was very impressed. I mean, obviously, when you have the legs and you can get some points on the ground, that's huge. And he had a couple big runs in some games, so he could certainly put up the numbers. So who knows? He might come back and still continue to be that strong. But now that they have DeMarco Murray in a decent running game, I would hope that he wouldn't have to run as much and obviously not get hurt as much.
Well, when you're looking at kind of ranking players of the year, is it hard to avoid the shiny object of their like totals that they had last year? Like a guy like Philip Rivers had great numbers overall last year,
Right.
but he really tailed off in the second half of the season.
Right.
How do you
I
just
I
get
really
past that?
look. I mean, so when I do my book and I have my player profiles, I show what their total points were, what their total points ranking was, so that people can see a guy like Rivers or Ben Roethlisberger last year, who was top 5 in total points. But then right beside that is that consistency number that shows, you know what, they were only 50% or 56% consistent, and that's just not going to get it done in a passing league like this. If your quarterback's not over 65, 70%, you're probably not going to be. It's not going to help you very much.
Yeah, I was almost surprised that Eli Manning actually ranked pretty well because it seems like he has 3 touchdown game or the pouting on the sideline kind of game.
Yeah, I think because their running game has been so weak the last couple years, I think he's had to throw the ball more. Their defense is not as strong. That always helps them having to play from behind. So, yeah, I think Eli has that consistency factor that he's not going to be much more above 75%. But again, if you can get him late, ninth, 10th round, I think he's got good value there if you want to wait on a quarterback.
Quarterback show's so crazy deep.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do a league with just one because you're like, what's the deal? I can grab like the 25th guy and probably have a good weekly starter.
I mean, you
like
could
Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, he's
right. Yeah. I mean, you could draft Kirk Cousins and Andy Dalton and have 75% consistency out of both of them for the season, and they're going in the 10th, 12th rounds, and both of them were over 75% consistent in the second half of the year when they were healthy. Dalton first half, Cousins second half. So
what was it like in New York? What was the conference you're at?
So basically, have you ever heard of Tout Wars for baseball? It's kind of all the experts getting together in New York City. They have their draft on Sirius Radio. Well, about 3 years ago, they created that for football. So Jake Seeley from Roto Experts put together this league called the Fantasy League of Experts. So I was one. They had 2 drafts in D.C. and 1 in New York City, and I went to the one in New York City. And so it was basically Mike Clay from ESPN, Pat Thorman from Pro Football Focus, Jake Seeley, David Ganos, Tim Heaney, some CBS Sports guys, Fox Sports guys, various people like that. Oh, Tristan Cockcroft from ESPN. So I was in it last year. I missed the playoffs by 1 game, so I'm hoping to redeem myself this year. But I had the 11th pick in the first round.
Do you prefer having a later pick like that, or do you like being mid, or where do you like to draft?
Honestly, it doesn't faze me at all. Last year I did a thing, and I didn't get a chance to do it this year, but I used the Fantasy Pros mock draft thing, and I showed that I could draft from any position with my consistency, and I could have the top team, based on their rankings, I could put together a top team without even, because I was picking the right players in points, and I showed that I can do that. And so I've been 11th actually 3 times this year, so it's been actually pretty easy for me to draft. But I was surprised because the other 2 leagues I got Adrian Peterson 11th, and he actually went before that. So I ended up getting, like I said, Jamal Charles, and then came back with Le'Veon Bell. So in my mind at that time, the wide receivers that I would have drafted were all gone by then. And so I felt, why not get 2 top running backs? Yeah, they're injured. Yeah, they have a suspension. But I figured, when they're healthy and they're playing, you're talking about 2 of the most consistent backs in the NFL.
Sure.
And, then I added Aaron Rodgers later. Like I said, Jarvis Landry, Eric Decker, Walker, Sanders, Denver defense. And then on my bench got Justin Forsett, James Starks. So, like I said, I felt I had a pretty consistent team from top to bottom. We'll see how it does.
Yeah, why is it that like Adrian Peterson led the NFL in rushing last year, and he's kind of fallen off this year? And the Vikings didn't really have what we call an offensive line. Like their right tackle got hurt before the season started, so they should be better. Like Bridgewater should be better. Yeah, I know he's got the old running back thing, but
yep, that's it. Yeah, because he's not Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, all those guys are going before Adrian Peterson, and I'll take him every day, all day. It's not even a thought process.
I mean, the Vikings came out yesterday, I believe it was, and said they intend to give him the ball at least 20 times a game. About 20. So, it does sound like I think people look at who's kind of behind that guy, and at some point, they're going to give McKinnon, the opportunity, and he's definitely a better pass catching back. And maybe people think that this, because it is. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with this. It's Adrian Peterson's last year in Minnesota.
Probably, yeah, right, right. So he's got something to play for. He's got something to prove. Um, yeah, I
Yeah, but
think
on the
he'll.
flip side, they also have to see what they have in McKinnon.
Right.
Rather than wait for next year when they don't have an Adrian Peterson. I do think that we're going to see them use McKinnon a little bit more. Free McKinnon,
Right.
right? But I
Right.
don't know. But yeah, I mean Adrian Peterson's still going to get
Right.
those. To me, it really more affects. Well, I mean, where do you take Teddy Bridgewater? And even though he looked good, in his first preseason game, but I don't know. It's
Yeah.
their offense is interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it being much different than last year, other than like Zach said that their offensive line should be a little better, so that should help. But like you said, he still led the league in rushing with a bad offensive line because he's Adrian Peterson. He can do that. You can't stack the box. You can't make Teddy Bridgewater try to beat you. Adrian Peterson's going to beat you most of the time. So,
Yeah.
um, so I mean, I've been surprised at how far he's dropped. But again, it's that shiny object that's called Todd Gurley, David Johnson, and Ezekiel Elliott, and all three of those guys are going way before Peterson, and then the rest of the first round's usually wide receivers at this point, which never used to be a thing that early, but that's the way it's going, and I don't disagree with it. I mean, I've had the number one pick a couple times, and Adrian Brown is not even a thought. I mean, it's just boom, it's done. Adrian Peterson's number one pick. He's proven when Ben Roethlisberger is quarterbacking, he's had 35 out of 35 consistent games over a 3-year period. It's kind of hard to beat. So.
Yeah, there's a pretty good chance he breaks the receiving mark this year. I think
Yeah.
in the games with Roethlisberger, he was on pace for something crazy like 160 catches because.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And it's not only that he's the main target; it's like their secondary guys aren't looking as good as they could.
Right.
I mean now.
Yeah, and I mean they have Wheaton over there, and they have some people, but teams double team. It doesn't matter. He just can't be stopped. I mean, he's just an amazing wide receiver, kind of like Julio Jones.
So do we have any hashtag hot takes from week one? I'm sure Sharona has some, but I wonder if anything like jumped out to you, Bob, from week one of the preseason.
No, I think week one of the preseason is one of those where I don't even really pay that much attention. Maybe look at injuries or stuff like that, but I didn't see anything that jumped out at me that I adjusted my tier draft list, but that drastically. If anything, it's been injuries like Stevie Johnson, or some of those guys that have fallen off the rankings because they got hurt and are either out for the season or out for multiple weeks. But at this point, really until we get into about week 3, we see some starters really playing some time. I think the biggest key for preseason will be Jamal Charles' health, Jordy Nelson's health, some of those guys that everybody wants to see get on the field and show that they're back and ready to go. But we may not see any of them because they're going to be smart and probably just keep them off the field. So.
See, Bob didn't want to say anything about week one because he didn't want to talk about exotic smash mouth. I'm going to let Sharona get all in your grill about the exotic smash mouth in week one of Titans. You were tossing out those Derrick Henry vines like couldn't believe.
Well, first of all,
for us, Sharona. Come on.
First of all, let's say this: the Chargers, woof, they're so bad.
Yeah.
And the Joey Bosa, excuse me, situation is really, what did week one tell us? Probably not a lot, but it sure was fun to watch Derrick Henry
Right.
consistently, and it wasn't. I think people thought Derrick Henry was going to be, a 3-yard back. Saw from him was a consistent, 8-yard gain, and he's certainly capable of more than that too. I thought it was a promising beginning. their bigger test is going to be against the Panthers this weekend.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you said, in the first week, the Terrence West, the Derrick Henrys, there's people that come out of nowhere, and you go, oh, wow. Um, but I usually don't make too much of it. But it's nice to be excited about those kind of players, especially when they're home team. I think the Browns did. No, never mind. They sucked. So there's nothing going on good in the Browns. So.
Well, I wouldn't compare Terrence West and Derrick Henry, but I understand what you're saying. I think he's better, but
Yeah.
we'll
Oh,
see.
yeah. Yeah. No, I think Derrick Henry will definitely get his chances. They're paying obviously DeMarco Murray a lot of money, and they're going to give him every chance to succeed. But he's going to need a break now and then, and that's where Henry fills in at. And if he pops off a good run or two, that's just a bonus for the Titans. Keeps both Henry and DeMarco Murray fresh. When DeMarco Murray's fresh, he's certainly a better player, as proven by the Eagles, because he wasn't, and he didn't do very well. So I think that I'm excited for Derrick Henry as much as I am for Derrick Henry being successful for DeMarco Murray, because I've drafted Murray in a lot of leagues so far because there's not a lot of love for him. Everybody's
Yeah.
kind of fallen off, saying, well, he's done. He's so bad. They trade him to the Titans, and he's washed up. But I think that he's got something to prove, and I think he's gonna show that he's not done yet.
Yeah. Well, I think too it's also a function of the Titans' offense isn't getting a lot of love or respect, and we had Sigmund Bloom on. It's been a few weeks ago, and he doesn't believe in the Titans' offense, and I can understand. Mike Mularkey hasn't really time, and what have we really seen? But I think that he was with the Bills, and you know, I think that we'll see a little better version. At least I'm hoping. Maybe I'm
Hmm.
just being too optimistic. And actually talked about this. What do you make of? What do you think the trade that the Titans finagled with Philadelphia does to Dorial Beckham Green's ADP?
Um, since it was pretty much a non-existence prior to that, in my mind, I think it's pretty much where it still is. He's just one of those typical kids, like a Justin Blackman or Josh Gordon, where he's just $1 million talent with a 10-cent head, and maybe going to the Eagles will help him. Sometimes changing teams makes a difference for these people, but more often than not, they still have the same 10-cent head. So I don't know if it's going to help him much, but there isn't a lot in Philadelphia either outside of Jordan Matthews. I mean, everybody thought Nelson Aguilar was going to be the guy, but he proved not to be. So maybe he'll get a chance. Maybe that change in scenery will help him, but I haven't seen him be drafted in too many leagues in anything under 16 rounds. So we'll see. Maybe he'll show something in preseason later, or maybe break out for them. They got Josh Huff, who was supposed to also be one of those young kids who's going to break out in Philly, and nobody really has other than Jordan Matthews. So we'll see.
Yeah, Nelson Aguilar doesn't look like he's coming through, and Ruben Randall sounds like he has the same
Oh yeah,
head.
yeah,
A lot of those
Well,
LSU receivers, other than Odell Beckham, just flame out in the NFL. I don't know what the deal is there.
well,
yeah.
I mean,
Anything?
the Cowboys babysat Des Bryant and
Hmm.
kept him from shooting himself in the foot figuratively. It's interesting to me though that you mentioned Ruben Randall and Nelson Aguilar's had issues of his own too, and to me that's just a recipe for trouble, and the same kind of trouble that you
Hmm.
saw with Josh Gordon in Cleveland with Johnny Manziel, and
Right,
so
right.
it
Yeah.
to me it's just odd. It's very 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 odd. I guess the Phillies just determined to be the bad news bears, right?
Well, I mean, last year they were so hyped for Chip Kelly, with DeMarco Murray and Bradford, and I mean, I don't think I've seen a team so hyped to come out of nowhere and to be so hyped with nothing ever proven in the past, and then just completely crumble. Um, it's been a long time, and the funny
Hmm.
thing is, he went to San Francisco and they started it again, and I'm like, are you people that stupid? Do you really
Yeah.
believe because now he's going to San Francisco that he's going to make Colin Kaepernick or Blaine Gabbert into a
Well,
superstar?
didn't they just signed Christian
Ego.
Ponder?
Huh?
They just signed Christian Ponder
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So how bad is this scenario with Chip Kelly? I mean, I heard all kinds of hype about Carlos Hyde being a superstar this year because Kelly was there. I'm like, he couldn't do anything with DeMarco Murray. How in the world is he going to make Carlos Hyde any better? So like I said, I just kind of sit here and just shake my head at some of this stuff. But again, everybody has their opinion, and I'll just say mine and say it's not going to happen. But
Before we get off
hey.
Philly, let me ask you this.
Okay.
I took it was a later round fly, I think. Oh, sorry, Darren Sproles. One of the beat writers is saying he's the best back on the Eagles. It doesn't say much for Ryan Matthews, and
No.
he's just a guy that I've always been scared of because he had that one good year, and basically that's it. So.
Scared of
Do you,
Matthews?
No, yeah, scared of Matthews.
Scared of Matthews, yeah. See, I love Darren Sproles.
I do too.
He's been
yeah.
one of my favorite consistent players for the past 3 or 4 years. When he was with the Saints, when he was with the Eagles, in a PPR format, he just does his job. He catches the ball and he runs, and he's very fast. So, he's showed it last year that he was pretty much actually more consistent than any of the other backs with Matthews and Murray in a PPR. And I assume that he's going to be just like that this year. In fact, I drafted him in the Fantasy League of Experts draft this past weekend, like 12th, 13th round as my running back 6 or something, 5th or 6th. So, yeah, I have no problem getting him, and I have in most of my leagues.
I took him in the Scotty Fishbowl. This format doesn't show me where I drafted him. It was later on, so.
Yeah, but no,
Probably,
I think Sproles
probably
did
later than that, probably like 15th or 16th. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really feel like 1 year before he retires, can one team just say, screw it, Sproles, you're our guy?
Yeah.
Because there's
I'd
one year
love
that
it.
Tomlinson got hurt, and Sproles is like their featured back for a week,
Yeah.
and they won a playoff game with him.
Yeah.
Because he's
The
that
problem
smaller
is he is up there
guy.
in years. I don't know if he can do it all game long, but when he's fresh and they bring him in third down or a series or two, man, he can just explode. But I don't know if he's an all game
I think
every
that's
kind
the
of back.
concern. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
I think.
have to be. It's the golden age of like third down backs. I feel like there are 15 of them that you can draft in fantasy leagues.
Oh yeah,
You
Danny
probably
Woodhead,
start as a flex or even a
Sproles.
running back
Oh
team.
yeah, exactly. All of
Almost
those
every
guys.
team has one, and then the Titans have Dexter McCluster. But
Yeah.
maybe not. Maybe not. You see
They
trade
Trey
Derrick
McBride
Henry.
returning punts and kicks? You see Bishop Sankey, baby? Yeah, Washington. I think everybody just enjoyed that. It's like, yeah.
Zach does not have any love for my man Dexter McCluster.
Yeah.
Bishop Sankey's preseason touchdown run is probably the best thing a Titans second round pick has done in like 10 years. That's unfortunate, but yeah,
Gotcha.
been a bad run. Since
Zach Brown was good
got
before he got.
Zach Brown, wasn't he in the country band?
Yes,
Okay.
he was good before he
He
got
was-
in the doghouse, and then he just never was able to really get out. And Akeem Ayers was good for a while too. I don't know.
Yeah, Akeem Ayers famously made like the last tackle before the interception in the Super Bowl. That's him.
That's him.
He would have whiffed on the next one if they'd handed the ball off, but yeah.
Oh come
He got a
on!
ring, and then they let him go, and then they
Traitor.
got like a compensatory traitor. I tell the truth. I'm probably on the harsh side, and Sharona's on the. For a while, I had Sharona come into the dark side, and we're kind of both on the negative. But somehow, Mike Malarkey, I don't know if he has.
The brainwashed her.
They listened. They finally
oh,
listened.
we drafted a tall running back from Alabama who beats the crap out of
to me.
Tennessee, so let's
Yeah.
like him.
I was on a good streak of them drafting guys that I had scouted and said they should draft for, pretty good while, and then Ken Wisenhunt didn't listen to me, and they predictably sucked, and so they drafted Derrick Henry, and I think that they're going to be better. So
All right.
we'll see.
Hey,
What
always
ways-
remember, you could root for the Browns. So
So you're a Browns fan?
well, I live in the Northeast Ohio area. I actually live in Canton, Ohio, home of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
That's a nice spot to be, like once a year. Just don't
What
watch
are
out for the. Don't get too close to the field. That's what
Yeah,
I've heard.
Yeah,
What are
no, the field.
what What are local people saying about that? That whole snafu with the field and everything.
I mean, the local people weren't the ones probably going to the game, so they didn't care. Yeah, it was disappointing.
Well,
I said to
they're
people, I said, if that would have happened anywhere in the United States in week 2 of preseason, nobody would have cared. Nobody would have cared.
yeah,
But because it was the first game, nationally televised, Hall of Fame weekend, it became huge.
yeah.
And it's sad, and it happened, but I mean, the NFL executive, I forget his name, took full responsibility for using that paint. Whatever reason didn't work. I, you know, but again, it was preseason. I said, so here's the Packers saying that they don't want to play on a hard, slippery field, but in December we'll be playing on ice in Green
Nice.
Bay, and they don't seem to be fazed by that. But no, we're not going to play preseason on that kind of stuff. So there's a
I,
lot of questions and a
yeah.
lot of issues, but it is what it is, and it happened.
I
So.
think it was more that one of the Packers equipment guys was walking around and looking at it, and the container, whatever. Oh, I remember now. After they figured out that they had used the wrong thing, they were trying to make it dry, and they were using some stuff that it said, and he took a picture of it, and I'll have to find it, but it said that it caused burning and irritation and problems if it came into contact with your skin.
Mm.
And it was at that point that he was like, oh well, wait, you know.
So put long sleeves on. I don't know.
Yeah. So
It's
I
like
mean,
you're football players.
Just
it
rub
was
some
just
dirt in it. When you don't have that
Yeah,
new turf,
exactly.
doesn't have dirt. So that's where I'm
Yeah.
sad though, because I remember the way back when the preseason game where the Titans were in wearing the Oilers throwbacks and the backup punter did the fake punt and ran for the touchdown. He had the best preseason of a backup punter ever because he hit like the Jerry Dome roof with one of his punts, and he
Nice.
got cut by the team and was never seen again. But it was a great preseason. Probably the best Titans player in the last. Sorry, Sharona, just kidding.
what? Huh?
We have a quarterback now, yeah. And Sharon and I will be in Nashville in I think 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
For the home opener.
Yes.
Nice.
We are
Do they
heading
play?
in to see the Vikings, Adrian
Ooh.
Peterson.
I'm going to try
The
to make it
return
this
of Michael
weekend.
Griffin. You'll be the one person in the audience clapping.
I'm going to try to make it this weekend.
Yeah.
For the
I've got some.
Panthers?
Yes, I've got some friends among the girl gang there, and so I'm going to do my best to try to make it and hook up and meet
Yeah.
up. So we didn't get a chance when I went to Charlotte for the NFC Championship game. The weather was bad for one thing, and
Oh, yeah. You got through like an ice storm to get
yeah, it was awful. You couldn't
Oh,
hardly
geez.
get around, and so I didn't. Yeah, we didn't get a chance to hook up, and so yeah, we'll see.
there. So, Bob, what are some like underrated, maybe we just go by position, like underrated,
that's fine.
consistent players, like let's start with like a running back that you think were kind of,
Well, since I already talked about Justin
upside.
Brissett, we'll kind of leave
That
him
would be
on.
some foresight. No.
But one of my other, like you said, favorite guys from that standpoint, I have to find if it's in the book. But one of the other guys that I have listed is Mark Ingram. He last year was actually the leading running back in a PPR format with a 92% clutch rating. Now, granted, he missed the 4 games, but he was 11 out of 12 going into that time frame. And right now he's getting drafted, late second round, early third. If you have a chance to maybe get an Adrian Peterson and then Mark Ingram on the turn, you're going to get some great value out of him. So he's certainly somebody who is undervalued in the early rounds. Like you said, later round outside of Forsett, there's some other guys out there that you can get. I think that provide some good value. Trying to think some of the guys. Well, Eddie Lacy obviously, fell off the face of the earth last year, got fat. When he was playing the year before, he was one of the most consistent running backs out there. He was in the 80% range. So I think he certainly could have a good year and has certainly been undervalued. Matt Forte, not a lot of love for him, always been one of the most consistent running backs in a PPR format. Playing for the Jets, if he stays healthy, I think he'll be right up there, 85% consistent. So I think there's a lot of guys that if you wait, if you don't grab, if you get those two wide receivers in the first couple rounds, you can get a Forsett, or Matt Forte, Danny Woodhead, of course, very consistent, in a PPR format. So I think there's a lot of guys out there that you can get, and some good value out of if you want to do their wide receivers early.
How are you feeling about the Seattle Seahawks running back situation? It seems like, they've always had a strong running game, but people seem to be staying away from everyone.
Yeah.
Christine Michael, superstar.
Yeah, it's a hot mess right now. I mean, right now, Christine Michael actually is probably one of the more grossly undervalued players who could end up being that starting role there. I mean, Pete Carroll's already come out and admitted that Michael's looking good. Thomas Rolls is not getting healthy fast enough. So yeah, in fact, I have a draft later on tonight. I'm thinking about getting Michaels late the game just to put him on my roster to stash him. He never really has panned out in any places he's went. But could be the opportunity in Seattle. I mean, their offensive line's still a little weak. We'll see how that helps. But that's Russell Wilson's team at this point. I think a running game without Marshawn Lynch. Rawls was good when he played, but he's just not healthy yet. So we'll see. But that's kind of a hot mess right now. I'm staying away from it.
Yeah, it does sound like Christian Michael was a guy who needed to mature, and I don't think anybody disagrees with that. And it took him a while to get it, if he has gotten it, like everybody seems
Right.
to think that he has. He does have all the talent in the world, and he's in his fourth year, I believe, but he really hasn't played a whole lot. So
No, I'd say there's not a lot of mileage on the tires, so he certainly has some fresh legs to get out there and prove it. And Seattle is that kind of team, and if he can just run good enough to keep people from just teeing off on Russell Wilson every time he goes back to pass, that's really all the Seahawks need at this point, and let Russell win the games, and Michaels and whoever can just provide a solid running game. I think it'd be good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's something to be said for opportunity. You mentioned Mark Ingram recently, and one of the key running backs to fantasy football championships last year was Tim Hightower, who I think had been in the league for 3 years. In fact, I'm pretty sure my dad had a Blake Bortles, Tim Hightower duo that led him to a championship.
Right.
So is there something to be said when you see like a really consistent running back get hurt and you feel like there's a backup who might inherit the role, that's a guy you should jump on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely scenarios where the handcuffs are important. A lot of people will say, well, I can get anybody to fill in a role. But, I mean, obviously D'Angelo Williams last year filling in for Le'Veon Bell was huge. Those two combined for an incredible season. But, Spencer Ware, right now in Kansas City backing up Jamal Charles is going to be big. Kristen Michael there is going to be, helping out. Eddie Lacy getting James Starks, I think, is very important because, if Lacy has something to prove, but he also hasn't been the kind of guy that can stay healthy. But like you said, Ingram and Hightower, the weird thing, and this was brought up this past weekend when we were drafting, somebody was mentioning how Mark Ingram played into the third quarter in the first preseason game. And the question was, why? Mark Ingram. That team has nothing to prove by leaving him in that long. So, like somebody said, they might burn him out before the preseason's over, and Hightower may be your starter. But that was surprising that they left him in that long, and hopefully they won't do that again. But yeah, there's definitely players and definitely teams that the handcuff is a good situation to have.
It's interesting. I was looking at my Scotty Fishbowl, and I love David Johnson, and and I think that he's you have to all.
I know where she's going.
With Uncle Bruce, listen, with Uncle Bruce, you have to always wonder because you just never know what he's going to do. But it does. Shut up. Zip it. I had forgotten that I did this, but I mean, I handcuffed David Johnson with CJ and with Andre Ellington.
You know what? I think that makes a lot of sense. One of my guys actually in my article in the book for undervalued or running backs, my last guy I have in there is Andre
Yeah.
Ellington. And the point I make is that just 2 years ago, when he played that first season, when they didn't have Chris Johnson, they didn't have David Johnson, he was one of the highest, most consistent backs of the year
Yeah.
until he got hurt.
Yeah.
And now he's third string, but you've seen some of the games he played in
Yeah.
where he came in and busted off a 50-yard touchdown
He's
run, and
amazing.
he's got an incredible talent. I said
Yeah.
I wish the Browns would have went out and got him in the offseason and got him away from Arizona and let him play in Cleveland. But
Yeah.
if David Johnson or Chris Johnson goes down, Ellington is huge,
And
huge
I do
value.
wonder if maybe, they might at some point consider,
Yeah,
making a trade or what have you. Yeah, when you were looking at value, and of course that is such a deep league that you're taking guys like
right,
that.
right, yeah.
The other kind of tandem situation I want to ask you about, and then I'll turn it back over to Zach, is in Jacksonville and what you think about the Chris Ivory, T.J. Yeldon situation.
I was honestly that to me was probably the most stunning signing in the
Was
offseason of
shocking.
anything I saw, because T.J. Yeldon last year was 75% consistent
Good.
as a running back,
Hmm.
and yet they went out and got this, Chris Ivory, and so I think that's obviously going to cut into his value. I really believe that Ivory's going to be stealing almost all of his, 1-yard runs. Anything within the 10 is probably going to be Ivory. So he's probably not going to score a lot of touchdowns, but I still think Yeldon has good value.
Hmm.
I think he's one of those guys in a PPR league that can still get up there and put up some clutch games week after week. And then, if you're in a standard league where touchdowns are more important, then Chris Ivory becomes more of a value. So, yeah, I think it depends on your scoring method, but either one of them, I think, can be fairly consistent just as long as you're not relying on them as a RB1 or 2 for your team. But as a flex, I think either one of them are good.
Fantasy players seem to be avoiding. It's amazing to me that T.J. Yeldon is not getting very much love at all,
Mm-mm.
and it is because Chris Ivory's a good back too,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
I
Well, and
am
Chris
very.
Ivy didn't Ivory score 2 touchdowns in the opening game? I wanted to
I,
say he rushed for 2. But maybe he didn't. Maybe it was a different game. But I thought he
I can't
scored
remember.
at
I
least
just can't
one,
remember.
maybe 2 touchdowns from the 1 yard line. But I'm like, wow, well,
The team
that's
only had 5 rushing touchdowns last year, and I'm sure Bortles probably had 1 or 2. So
yeah,
it doesn't hurt
yeah,
it. That's one of the things that's changed is you can have multiple valuable running backs,
mhm,
and the fact that wide receivers rule the roost.
Hmm.
So in terms of receivers, who are some of those undervalued, consistent guys you're going after? I mean, you already mentioned kind of Decker. Who
Decker,
are some
right?
of the
Yeah.
middle type round guys that are looking for?
Alan Hearns in Jacksonville is one of my favorite wide receivers as a wide receiver 3 on most of my teams. I mean, last year he was almost as consistent as Allen Robinson. He was right up in the 65-70% range. Robinson was like 75-80%. And not a lot of people think about Allen Hearns. Everybody all about Allen Robinson, which I get, and he's a very great, he's a great wide receiver, but Allen Hearns was just as consistent, and as a wide receiver 3, if you can get 70% consistency out of that, that's going to be golden. If you've got 2 really top players like an Antonio Brown and a Jordy Nelson or Randall Cobb, and then put Hearns as your third guy, that's going to be some great wide receiving core right there. So definitely, he's one of my favorites. Another guy that he's getting a little more love because of we talked about the young players but is Dante Moncrief.
Hmm.
Moncrief's, if you look at his profile, his consistency numbers weren't that great, but one of the things you'll see in the profile is the fact
We're
that
cat people, Bob. I'm sorry.
no, that's fine. I have one of each of those. I have one of your tabbies, which is my cat, my wife's cat actually, and then my daughter has the black cat, just like
Aw.
Zach. So we don't let them in the same room together because they'll kill each other.
Aw.
Um, but anyway, so going back to Dante Moncrief, when Moncrief played, when Andrew Luck was quarterbacking, he was 3 for 4 in clutch games, so 75% consistency. Small sample size, but when Luck was on the field, Moncrief was very consistent last year, so I could see that happening again this year with him and T.Y. Hilton.
Is there any? I almost feel like with Moncrief there isn't any meat on the bone because like he's going to the late third, fourth round now. It seems like
Yeah, he's a little too
people have
high
caught
for
on.
me. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's going a lot higher than I would wanted to draft him. Like I said, at this point, usually, my RB2 or wide receiver 2, I'm looking at Deckers and Randall Cobbs and that kind of stuff. And you're right, Moncrief is going in that range, and it's a little bit too high for me. So right now, I don't have Moncrief on any of the teams, but again, if somebody drafts him, I understand it. I mean, he's certainly got the talent. I just don't know if that sample size is big enough for me to prove that he can do that over a full season. But like I said, some people believe that. And then the last guy that I really like a lot is Tyler Lockett.
Oh yes.
When he was on with even with Doug Baldwin doing as well as he did, Tyler Lockett is the future of that team, and that kid's got a lot of talent, especially if you're in a league that has points for kick returns, punt returns. Kid's amazingly fast, and so he's certainly one of my favorite guys as well. But the last guy I'm going to focus on is Kamar Aiken. Last year, believe it or not, Kamar Aiken was 75% consistent, and you'll see it in the book. And everybody's like, well, but he can't do that again. Well, why not? Steve Smith's already hurt again. All these players are hurt. There isn't much for them to throw to again except Kamar Aiken and, Ben Watson is there now at tight end. So I really believe Kamar Aiken is great value. I've gotten him as my wide receiver 4 or 5 in most leagues. And again, if he can just put up similar numbers, that's going to be a great value as a flex player.
This is my wide receiver group in Scotty Fishbowl. Since you mentioned Tyler Lockett, I've got somewhere around round 15, I believe. I took Danny Amendola. Cole Beasley was a late round pick, because
he's a man crush.
Well, you got to take somebody.
I don't know any other reason why, but okay.
Well, I mean, you got to take somebody, and right.
Somebody who's alive.
You're
Okay.
kind of scraping the bottom. Travis Benjamin,
that's
Corey,
a good pick. That's a great pick.
Corey Brown, I took with my last pick.
Okay.
Philly Brown, Corey Brown, Ted Ginn.
Ted Ginn's a good pick.
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins. I think he was my first pick.
Sure.
Tyler Lockett.
Right.
You just talked about Tajay Sharp, who we haven't talked about. Golden Tate and Robert Wood. I wanted to ask you about Robert Wood because it seems like this could be his year. Although we're hearing some really good stuff about Marcus Goodwin.
Again, Robert Woods has really never really broke out like everybody thought he was. I really just don't know if he's got it in him to be consistent. He's never gotten the targets. He's never really gotten much of the opportunity. I just don't see him doing anything that I feel like there's nothing there from a consistency standpoint in any games or any kind of stretch of games where like, oh, here's a small sample size that we could base something on, and Wood has never really had that, so I'm not a fan at this point this year.
Well, when was the last time a USC wide receiver was good?
Never.
I mean, a USC skill player in general, you have to go back to Reggie Bush and Carson Palmer. Even though
Carson Palmer still has it, yeah.
Even though on the the defensive side of the football, Jarrell Casey's been very good for the Titans.
Yeah. No, I mean USC is college is college. Like I said, that's why you'll never see a college a rookie in my book because they've proven no consistency in an NFL uniform. So. It doesn't matter what they did in college in my mind. I don't care if they won the Heisman. I don't care if they set all kinds of records. Until they prove it in the NFL. I mean, the article in the book shows less than 8% of all rookies drafted in the first 4 rounds since 2010 have even earned over a 60% consistency rating in their rookie season. So I just have I won't say no love because I know there's certainly guys that have pulled it off. Le'Veon Bell, Odell Beckham, and maybe Ezekiel Elliott will be the next guy. But sorry, if I have a choice between
Derrick Henry's going to be the guy.
Well, Derrick Henry, yeah, okay.
Of course.
What What are the numbers on guys repeating in terms of consistency? And do you think that Cam Newton can continue to be, the guy that he's been?
I think what I usually see in repeats are usually the situation doesn't change. It's very difficult for a player to lose top players around him, whether it's running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, etc. So Cam certainly is in that perfect scenario to be able to do it again. But on the other side, you also have a much tougher schedule, so that makes a difference. Where the year before it may not have been as strong. But I think Cam Newton, if anybody can do it, Cam Newton can do it. I mean, the Aaron Rodgers, they're certainly players. Tom
Tom
Brady's,
Brady.
Peyton Manning's of
Hmm.
the past. They're
Hmm.
just that special, and they can because they're that good. Tom Brady can have Zach and I be wide receivers, and he'll still, be consistent from game to game. It doesn't matter for him. I mean, he can put
David
anybody out there.
Gibbons. David
Yeah,
Gibbons.
or Brandon LaFell or whoever he threw out
Yeah.
there. It doesn't matter. And Peyton Manning was the same way. So, Cam Newton, obviously, the only thing that scares me with Cam is he relies on a lot of fantasy points coming from his legs. And when
Yeah.
you're out there running around, there's always a chance that you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And so, that's what scares me about guys like Cam is that, there's that possibility because he's running too much. Same with Mariota. I mean, certainly those legs can be a lot of value fantasy points wise, but it also puts him in a lot of risk
Tyrod
running
Taylor.
around. Tyrod Taylor, same way. Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Which at one time Cam Newton got hurt is when he got hit by a freaking car. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Speaking of Tom Brady, what's your sense of Martellus Bennett in New England, and how do you think he's going to fare in terms of fantasy value?
Um, I don't really think, everybody still wants to believe that at some point by getting another great tight end that they'll have that magical Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, less the killings kind of season.
Let's hope less the killings,
Yeah.
right?
I just don't know if Martellus Bennett is that person. He really played poorly last year in Chicago. Now I don't know if it was an attitude because the Bears wanted rid of him and they put Zach Miller in and kind of pushed Bennett out of the way. But Bennett really was horrible last year, and he actually was a pretty decent, consistent tight end to that point. With Gronk, with Edelman, it's hard to tell. I mean, the first 4 games you've got Garoppolo in there, so who knows? He might get some decent games. I just have a feeling that he could have some big games, but I really don't see the consistency coming from Bennett in that role. If anything, he might hurt Gronkowski's consistency if teams double team him and let Bennett roll a little bit more. But I don't see Bennett being a value, and I don't think anybody else does because his ADP has been pretty low. I've rarely seen him be drafted, as a number 1 tight end for sure. Even as a backup, I haven't heard his name come up too much.
Yeah, he's
I would agree
currently
with
going kind of as a 10th rounder. That's a Sigmund Bloom crush right there. But
Oh,
you did
really?
notice,
He's all over Bennett?
you did notice in the first preseason game, Garoppolo hit him like 3 times in a row, but I think he was the only kind of starter level guy to be in the game at the time. And obviously they're not putting Gronk in. He might not even play the whole preseason.
Right.
But is it harder to get consistency from tight ends just because they are lower volume guys? Or
Well, it's funny. Until a few years ago, you're right. It was that way. But I think teams have went out and drafted and gotten more athletic tight ends like Jordan Reed, Travis Kelce,
Zach
Eifert,
Ertz.
Fleener, Zach Ertz, and then you already had Delaney Walker, Gronkowski, Olsen, Jason Witten. Even Gary Barnage became a household name, and I lived in Cleveland. I had no idea who this guy was. So, I think teams are starting to recognize that if you if you have a good, physically talented tight end, that they can be very useful. New England started it, and I think everybody just following along. So because of that, there is a lot more depth at tight end, and you can get more consistency at tight end. Like I said, Julius Thomas is one of my favorite undervalued tight ends this year. Last year, at the end of the season, he was like 5 of 6 in clutch games with Blake Bortles and everybody there because teams started focusing so much more on Robinson and Hearns, and Thomas stayed healthy, which is a rarity. But when he was playing, he was, and so I'm drafting him as one of my tight ends if I don't get, like a guy like Olsen or Reed or Kelsey. I'm getting, Julius Thomas in the 10th round, 11th round, and I'm okay with that. And like I said, so I think there's a lot more depth at tight end than there used to be. You can actually wait a lot longer. I still like getting, a 6th, 7th round of a Kelsey or Olsen or Walker if I can. But if not, I'm okay with Julius Thomas a few rounds later. So I think there's a lot more depth.
Yeah, I think the injuries have kind of hurt, and ever since he got away from Peyton, everybody thought he was going to fall off, but he's just turn around and catch the ball in the end zone. He's no Bubba Franks with the famous 2 catches, 2 yards, 2 touchdowns a lot.
Exactly.
I mean,
If you're an end zone target, that's a thing. It's not Mercedes.
Well, he's a downfield target too. And when you've got, Robinson and Hearns taking the outside, positions, there's a big middle opening up for Thomas. He's a big, tall guy, big hands. So I think they'll use him a lot more, just as much this year, and can provide some great value, especially in a PPR league.
Real quick, just since we're talking about tight ends, and hey, could somebody please tell Uncle Bruce in Arizona that tight ends are beautiful and wonderful,
people too.
And can he please use Darren Fells, who I love? But no, that's not what I want to ask about.
Okay.
It's weird to me, and I can remember getting so much flack, so much hate on Twitter for saying that I thought Kobe Fleener was overrated. But isn't it odd to you to see what's going on with Kobe Fleener in New Orleans?
Odd in the fact of that he's going to be the starter?
Well, he's 4th on the depth chart right now.
Yeah,
What?
That was something that we didn't really bring up as
Oh, wow, I missed that one.
depth charts that come out in the preseason. Like, yeah, the Saints listed him as 4th string, although I think the last practice he was with the first. I don't know, it was some kind of send him a message, but
Oh, okay. Well,
I wonder, I mean, he had some nice stretches there. It was kind of like, because the Colts had 2 tight ends, they didn't really have a tight end for fantasy purposes. So if one guy got hurt, and Dwayne Allen got hurt every other week,
right.
He
Fleener, of
did.
course, ran wild against Titans every time because they can't cover anybody.
My thought was if Fleener was kind of pushed out of the Colts, then he must have more of a problem mentally and being focused than Dwayne Allen did, because I thought Fleener was had the better talent, but they obviously had no problem letting him walk to go to New Orleans. On the other hand, I'm surprised New Orleans grabbed him if he did have an attitude problem, because that's usually not the kind of people that they go after. Drew Brees won't put up with that kind of crap. So I don't know. Maybe that was a message. We'll have to see later on. I haven't drafted Fleener yet because I've always focused on either Walker, or Julius Thomas most of my leagues so far. And Fleener's gone a lot earlier than those guys because there is that love relationship of, wow, if Ben Watson can be good in New Orleans, then Kobe Fleener should be a god and should be the next Jimmy Graham. Maybe. We'll see. But I haven't had a chance to draft him yet. It may not be.
It does seem like Fleener is already being drafted at his peak. Like he's like the 5th tight end off the board, and you're like, come on.
Yeah.
Delaney Walker is even going after him in some cases, and come on, man.
Yeah.
It would not be a good it would not be a good fantasy show, since we've talked so much about Delaney Walker, without me once again telling everyone that I was on the Delaney train before anybody.
Before you even got to the Tennessee?
Yes, I lobbied hard for the Titans to pick him up from San Francisco, because the writing was on the wall. They were going to let him walk,
Right.
and I was like, they have got to go out at this in the off season, and I was loud and proud about it, and they did. And
good. Well, like I said, he's been the second most consistent tight end the past 2 years, once behind Gronk and once behind Antonio Gates. So, yeah, like I said, he's one of my favorite guys, has been the last couple of years, and he's gotten a lot more love this year than he has in the past.
Yes.
But like you said, he's still around 6th, 7th, and guys like Fleener and Ertz and those guys are going before him, and I'm like, no, he'll be on my team, thank you. So yeah, no, I love Delaney.
Yeah, and it's wild that he was drafted the same year as Vernon Davis, and in a few years he might actually top Vernon Davis's career numbers, because it looks like it's weird. Like Vernon Davis is actually on Washington's roster, but it's like he's not.
oh, he's so washed. It's so
Well,
sad.
I took Reed like in the third round and then our fourth round. Then I took
Right.
Niles Paul like my last pick because we had 22 rounds because I thought they gave him an extension. I don't know what Vernon Davis is doing there because he sounds like he doesn't really want to play anymore.
Well, he
Yeah.
hasn't looked like he wanted to play for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've never
Completely.
again talk about another tremendous talent and just no care, no ability, no whatever you want to call it, drive. Just goes out there. And I know him and Kaepernick didn't get along, but there's a reason why Kaepernick wasn't thrown to him because he wasn't trying, he wasn't making an effort. So, and everybody froze. You guys still out there? Hello? You guys froze on me, but I mean, I can see me. It says it's still live. See if they all come back on. Here we go. There's Zach.
Oh wait,
Zach's back.
that was weird.
Yeah, I was talking, and then I looked at you two, and you were both frozen. And then
Sharona disappeared. Yeah, I was like, wow. Yeah,
it's like they all hated me.
He comes back and gets you.
They all love Vernon Davis, and they all just turned me off.
Because the Broncos traded nothing for him last year.
Yeah, right.
He got
And
a
he still
ring,
did-
but I don't
yeah.
know if he ever caught a pass or did anything with him.
No, he still could
Done.
beat out Daniels.
That's a sign from the Google Hangout gods, and we'll have to find another way to do the show because Google Hangouts are apparently going away. Sad thing.
They're
Really?
moving. They are
It's
moving.
my crush.
They're not going away. They are
The
just
YouTube
moving
or-
to YouTube Live.
Okay,
Oh,
So-
okay.
see? Sharona knows these things because she knows things.
She's on top of this.
I've been trying to talk Zach into trying Twitch, because I'm a gamer and I Twitch.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that on Xbox. Yeah.
I hear there's a pill for that. Sorry. So Bob, tell everybody where to find you,
All right.
your book and your site and all the good stuff. We're getting toward the hour point, so let's
All
do
right.
the
Well,
old
then, thank you for
fast
having me on, and so everybody can find me on Twitter at Bob_Lung, Lung, just like you breathe with. And you can find the website, which is bigguyfantasysports.com. On there, you can, again, go there and subscribe, and you can use the tool to put in your scoring method to figure out who the most consistent players are, not only for your draft for preseason, but also during the year as we update the stats every week. There will always be articles and everything there as well. And, email is just bob at bigguyfantasysports.com. I'm also writing over a little bit. You'll see my stuff at Fantasy Pros and all that kind of exciting stuff. So thank you guys again for having me. I really
Thanks for coming
appreciate
on.
being a part of it.
I
So,
really enjoyed your consistency guide, and I recommend everybody go out and get it and read it. It's, it's fascinating.
Oh, and one last plug. If anybody lives near Canton, Ohio, where the Pro Football Hall of Fame is, this weekend we're having the first annual Pro Football Hall of Fame Fantasy Experience Day. And you can come, and the experts will be myself, David Dodds, Jeff Ratcliffe from Pro Football Focus, Mike Clay from ESPN, Michael Fabiano from NFL Network, and then the Hall of Famers are Warren Moon, Chris Dolman, and Anthony Munoz. And we're having an all-day Saturday fantasy day. Everybody comes. Participants can, we'll be going over our own picks, but, free. They can, ask us questions, take pictures, get autographs of all the Hall of Famers, and
Fun.
so it's gonna be a good time. I'm looking forward to.
Fun.
It's only $99 for the day. It actually starts Friday night with a dinner. There's a Saturday breakfast, lunch, and dinner Saturday night, and like I said, then there's we're gonna have a fantasy leagues after the day where people can compete for prizes to win tickets to the enshrinement game and concert next year, as well as I think a $1,000 draft at the Hall of Fame for your league next year. So a lot of cool stuff, a lot of great value out of the $99. So anybody lives in the area, make sure you go to profootballhalloffame.com and you can register there for the event this Friday, Saturday.
We'll tweet out these links.
All right, we will do that.
Sounds
All right.
excellent. Well,
All right,
Sharona,
thanks,
what
guys.
you got? Thank you, Bob.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob.
All right,
Have a great
have a
evening.
good night.
Good luck on your draft.
Thanks, I will.
All right, so we technical issues have been my bane this week. So
Mhm.
we did
Now it says
not.
it's still alive. Is that true?
Yeah, we're still live. I haven't. We'll be doing a podcast on Friday. Back Talk. We'll do a podcast on Friday. Doug Moore is going to be on from Inside the
Okay.
Pylon, where I write, and as well as my friend Matt. We've been doing a segment, so check that out. And my first article, my first submission for Inside the Pylon should be dropping soon. And of course, find me here every Wednesday night, and you can follow me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona.
Cool.
And before we close it out, of course, Zach Law, Zach_Law on Twitter. Haven't really been posting much lately. Maybe I'll get some more beer stuff out there. But we will be bringing back the Going for Two auction in a couple
Oh,
weeks.
yes.
Mike Norgerson will be on there, and we'll get everybody who was on last year who wants to play. And Sharona might be hitting the brandy for that one, so that's always a good time.
I'll have to
Every
buy
green
some.
backpacker the pulse she will have. And then the following week we'll do a Going for Two redraft.
Ooh,
Mix
fun.
of people, maybe even Mr. Don will join us. But thanks again to Bob for being on tonight. Thanks, of course, to
guys.
Sharona. And as we like to sign off, enjoy good beer and kiss my grits.